Welcome back to Junction 119. This is Casen.
This is Kellan, and this is a restart because we literally just had
Yeah.
issues off the camera. That's what
Yeah.
happens when you have updates on your computers and you don't record your show for, a month into the new year. And
Yeah.
what sucks, Kason, is there was a great intro with that, which we now have to speed through sort of like the all the little character moments in season 2 of Loki.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about the shirt you have on, which I reacted to off
Well,
the
yeah,
air?
yeah. So in the archives of the lost footage, there's a reaction to Kellen reacting to this shirt that I'm wearing, which is a Travis Kelce jersey that I just, picked up from uh Fanatics.
It looks great though.
Yeah. Yeah,
Genuinely.
I was like intentionally hiding it, and then I just pulled it up on air, and he yeah.
Yeah, and my immediate reaction was, okay, are we carrying this bit into the new year? Which I will add a new question, or not a new question. I'll say this. Yeah, it's not the first time you've done that to me. You've had some things on the air before that, like, cool jersey here, there, and the other. You're known for that. So I complimented you. The fits and everything look good, and I wanted to pull up here and say, hey, I'm also wearing red for Derrick Rose Day. You have the Bulls hat on, but when we lost touch with each other, which, by the way, Casey, can you still hear me?
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah,
might be going a
good.
little spotty here and there, but right now we're fine.
Cool. I can hear you too loud and clear. We were actually in the midst of giving you. We're gonna talk about our most anticipated movies of 2025. That's gonna be the bulk of the back end of the show. There might be a cut here and there just to transition, which worked last time. But we were getting into what was reacting to the college football playoff and I mentioned it's been more of a snooze fest so far. We're going to talk about both brackets, both NFL and college football. And Kaysen was in the midst of essentially we were talking about the first round, and without necessarily pulling up what we were talking about beforehand, to kind of bring it back, Kaysen, uh, for our listeners, viewers out there that may or may not agree with the way the first round essentially is set up, we were essentially talking about how the first four games, like we predicted in our last show, shout out to the friend of the show, Josh Long, for joining us and helping us predict it, that all the home teams won and how we would necessarily fix and or alter this going forward, of which it is the very first time we've seen a 12-team playoff.
Hmm.
So you can take your point from where it was, because either way, we'll say different things now that we're restarted. So go ahead.
No, yeah. I like I said in the prediction show, you have matchups like Indiana, Notre Dame, and SMU and Penn State, and it's just and like you just have guys lining up in front of other guys completely on different levels. Completely, different sizes, different abilities, to the point to where you see dramatically uh one-sided games like we saw with that, and in the next round with Boise State. Um and so it's something needs to be done to address sort of, you know, why are these teams playing significantly lower level teams? I don't get me wrong, like I definitely think that, teams like that should have a chance and should be invited. It's just I think everybody, including them, would prefer the opportunity to win a game rather than get, sent onto their doom against Penn State at home. You know what I mean?
Well, you say that, but it makes me think of what people would have said the first time, early in the NCAA playoff for NCAA tournament for basketball. You know what I mean? Most of the time, the team seated higher wins. I think there's something to be said for that. You can't make football something that it's not, and you can't just shoehorn something like this game into a system bracket like this and not expect it to usually go probably how it's going to go, just with the way American football is
Mhm.
structured. Would you agree?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we've seen it in the NFL too. I mean, to where a lot of the first round or the divisional games, or so the wild card games, are pretty lopsided. Um, I think it was that way last year, to where they're just not competitive.
Well,
Um,
absolutely, and I would go as far as to, and this is actually a good thing that we're talking about both of these things today. Just in the sports half of the show, the wild card games are going to be probably pretty good games this weekend. The divisional games usually aren't. I mean, it's usually how it's kind of gone, especially in years where we have a pretty dominant team at the very top. Shout out the jersey you have on today. Um, and I just think that part of this is just the way in football, the cream tends to rise to the top. And it's just through all the things that I mentioned that you talked about in our last show of, I think how many times did you make an argument for a team of, I think these guys are bigger. These guys, athlete per athlete, are just better. It's just how it goes. And I found myself, I didn't get a chance to say this before the restart, Casen. I found myself just kind of saying to myself and others, well, of course this happened. Why are we surprised? Why are we surprised that a bunch of warm weather teams went up to the north against, in these home environments and got destroyed
mhm.
and it wasn't a contest. And you made mention that you made mention both on and off air that we both thought that Ohio State, Tennessee would be closer, but I think that's more because no one knew what to expect out of Ohio State. And we will get to the buzzsaw, as you mentioned, they have become. But go ahead, rebuttal to that.
Well, no, right, but and I think also this isn't even entirely an argument to say that these teams or that we need to go back down to two-team BCS system. Like
No, and
like
I'm not
I I,
saying
I
that.
think I think I think having this expanded playoff is good because what do you think SMU or Indiana or Boise State I would rather have? Like a meaningless bowl game in like the Pop Tarts Bowl where it doesn't matter and half the roster sits out, or an actual playoff game to where you have a 1 in 50 chance that some freak thing happens and you guys actually win. Like I mean, you
Well,
have to take that chance. Like
you
if
have
you're
to
there,
take
you're
that chance.
invited.
If your question is,
But
do you think
something can
they'd rather?
happen.
If your question to me is, do you think that they would rather play in a game that still matters for the national championship versus a bowl game that doesn't matter? They would probably pick the playoff game, and I agree with what
Yeah.
you're saying there. That being said, I think that there's this insane insane incessive need to try and make sure that the playoff generates nothing but incredible football games, and I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. The elements are not there to make sure that every game is incredible, considering, Casen, that we've had 8 games and only one of them can be argued was even good. Would you agree?
No.
No.
I mean, I think there's been more than one.
There's been
Like I
one
there
good
were
game. One.
I and which one do you say it was a good
Texas
game?
and Arizona was the only good game. The rest were blowouts and or uninteresting. And if you're going to try to make the argument to me that Penn State and Boise State was interesting for like the first half, well then yeah, okay, sure. But it
I
ultimately
okay. I
wasn't.
mean if you're talking about like entertaining, sure, but I mean I the Rose Bowl got interesting in like the third. Like when Oregon kind of came back, it got a little interesting. I mean the Notre Dame Georgia game it was interesting for
That's the
most of it.
closest
Like
one.
like
That's
like
the
it, it
closest
wasn't it
one.
wasn't it wasn't like a shootout, but it was close for most of the game. Um,
Until Notre Dame
so
put them
yeah,
away, you're right.
yeah. So I mean there's yeah, I think there was more than just the one game. It's just the issue is like they're usually like good quarters or good halves, and then it just kind of falls apart.
Well, let me kind of move things along to a space that I really wanted to get to today about talking about this, and that is that both of us had serious W's when it came to picking this bracket. You picked
Yeah.
Ohio State to make it this far. I picked Notre Dame to make it this far and beat Georgia. And here we go. You've got the semifinal, Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas, and Ohio State. Four, longtime blue blood programs. Go ahead.
I
Go ahead.
I did kind of audible my picks at the last second on air to Ohio State Penn State in the national championship game, which is still a plausibility.
You didn't audible. Oh,
Uh,
you audibled from like what you had written down.
yeah, I originally I think had Georgia written down, and then I changed it to Penn State because I was like, I don't know about that.
Respect. I like that.
So, uh, yeah, so I felt pretty Confident in that one. So we'll see. I mean, Penn State Notre Dame should be a fun matchup.
For the Ohio State fans that undoubtedly will hear our cast and do listen to and watch it and
Mhm.
everything, let's talk about this because I think the story of the playoffs so far has been the Buckeyes. I don't think that's even really an argument, right? Uh, yeah, I mean they are playing like this roster figured was capable of, and I ask a question to multiple people here, Casen, and I ask it to you as well. I don't know if I talked about it much in our cast with Josh, the previous show, but remember how many times we've talked on here about the Stanley Cup playoff and how it's like the second season, and it's like you
Mhm.
gotta flip the switch on, and it's like okay, it comes down to how many games you can win in a row. Are we seeing college football's version of that? Because think about it. If you're Ohio State, it's like, yeah, we've
Yeah.
got the most talented roster. Yeah, we kind of, and obviously the loss to Michigan propelled them. They had to hear about how bad they were, yada, 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 yada. You take all that motivation, you take all the talent this team has had all year, and you unleash them upon it's like, okay, 4 games to a national championship. Okay, no one thinks we're going to do it. Watch this. I mean, to me, it just has all the makings of why I've said to multiple people, it's going to, including you, it's going to be Ohio State versus Notre Dame in the, you know, uh, you know, you guys doubted us bowl, basically. Embarrassing loss, redemption bowl almost. Any thoughts on that? I mean, these guys
Yeah, yeah.
are
Well,
lights
which
out.
first let me just say that'd be a really good storyline because I mean
Oh
Marcus
yeah,
Freeman up against alma mater. That'd be a huge ratings bonanza. But
100%.
um, I think yeah. So I would agree with that, and that there's been a lot of discourse in the Buckeye um side of the internet because there's been a lot of comparisons with Ryan Day to John Cooper, uh, who was the coach before Jim Tressel. And people were saying, like, if the playoff existed in the 90s, how many national championships would John Cooper have?
Yeah,
Because his thing was he'd lose to Michigan and then the season would be over. But if
right.
you got a second chance to play people who weren't named Michigan to win a national championship,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and so it's kind of the thing. It's like it's yeah. I think the playoff is something that's kind of built for a coach like Ryan Day because Ryan Day is a tremendous game prep coach. I have no idea what he and Chip Kelly were doing the, the week of Thanksgiving. I have no idea what that was. I don't know. I have no idea why they decided to completely change who they were for the one game they couldn't do that. But I don't get it. I don't understand it. But they managed to at least get back to what they're supposed to be doing, and it's worked. And so yeah, I mean, I
yeah.
think the idea of having redemption and a second chance to meet some of the goals for your season, including winning a national championship,
If
is exactly what it is. We've seen this every year. Ryan Day makes it in the playoff. Like
absolutely,
if if a field goal goes in as the clock strikes midnight against Georgia a couple years ago, they win a national championship. They're
100%.
boat racing TCU,
Yep,
and so yeah, and so again, I will concede some of the ridiculousness that I said a couple month and a half ago at the time. But it's just Ryan Day is really good at preparing for things like this
he
and
is.
he's a coach built for this system.
He is, and I think that there's something to be said for if I'm some sort of major blue blood head coach or coordinator, even at this point, and maybe this just comes from having played the video game, College Football
Hmm.
25, for the last like 4 months, 5 months. Um, I'm thinking, okay, let's just like top load our schedule with some sort of impossibly to beat opponent, like really tough game. It'll show us our shortcomings. Even if we lose, we will buzzsaw and or close to buzzsaw our conference schedule, and then we'll make this thing. And even if we're not the champions, we'll at least make the tournament. And then you flip the switch. Like I really think that you almost need to coach for the second season now, especially if Ohio State or Notre Dame win the national championship. Like I think one of them will.
Hmm.
I think people are going to analyze this and be like, man, look at the Buckeyes or look at the Irish, even so far, look at the two of them and think, strategically, a loss doesn't completely destroy your season anymore. It's more like the other college sports in that all we got to do is make it. And oh, by the way, maybe it's better that we play in the first round because if we sit around on the bye, that might be worse for us. You see what I mean? It's going to change the
I
philosophy of coaching.
Exactly. Here's the thing: is that this is exactly the point. Is that the ability to identify what you screwed up in one or two games
Oh yeah,
and fix it is the key here. Is that coaching is so important, and that's why the guys who know their roster, know their team, know their scheme, and know how to fix their problems are going to do very, very well. For example, Marcus Freeman got so much stuff on the internet for losing to
NIU.
fu future
Yeah,
Mountain West member.
future Mountain West
Um,
number NIU Huskies. Yes, of course.
and now here they are, pretty much with even odds to make the national championship game. So
Yeah,
and they have the least amount of losses from anybody left. Ohio
absolutely.
State, Texas, Penn State all have two losses, and they only have one, and it's to a MAC school. And
Yeah, also,
I,
the other thing that was kind of cool at the time, and I'll just tie this into it. Thomas Hammock literally was on, I think, Pat McAfee, and was like, "Yeah, I talked with Marcus Freeman about the stuff we saw against Notre Dame. That we're not going to.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
Is that
want
is
him to
that he
have
was like,
success." And he's like, and he actually, I remember him making a comment. I want him to have success for obvious reasons, and it is noteworthy, case in that one way or another the first black head coach is going to be coaching in the national championship game, which was kind of a very interesting stat until I really thought about it, and I was like, I guess it's not really that surprising when you consider the top programs and history
mhm,
and just how little amount of time a lot of black head coaches get in comparison. Just historically, I'm just saying.
yeah.
It's really cool that it's going to be James Franklin or Marcus Freeman to at least coach in the game, right?
Mhm.
Um, that being said, I pull it back. The reason I say Thomas Hammock, obviously another Black American head coach. So, but there you go. And then he literally was like, okay, the things that we saw against that NIU, good team, was able to exploit against us. Okay, let's fix all that and just win every game for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, like I had serious concerns about that Georgia team, and lo and behold, like Notre Dame just kind of shoved them around for
For the record,
3 hours.
I don't
So
think Notre Dame, I don't, I still think Notre Dame wins that game, even if Carson Beck plays. I think
yeah,
it's a closer
yeah.
game. I think Georgia's able to move the ball a little bit better, but Notre Dame's defense was really the difference there, and I think
No,
they would have
I
bottled them
completely
up too.
agree. I mean, even with Carson Beck, I mean, we saw Georgia Tech take him to the brink, and it's like, what?
Exactly, exactly. So
So,
it's going to be fun, man. Like, I have your exact prediction could happen. It's still there, and I would imagine a lot of folks in Columbus would like a certain team to go on through. It's going to be interesting to see if Ohio State continues to look as good as they have against Texas, a team that Scattaboo, took them to the wall. Shout out Arizona State. I want to just point out I picked Arizona State to beat Texas, and for a little bit there, that was looking pretty good. Uh, Incredible comeback. I mean, what's nice is Arizona State, regardless of what you want to say about them, they didn't look like they didn't belong. They 100% looked like they belonged there.
mhm.
And a couple more things go a different way, including a potentially controversial non-targeting call, which was not called targeting on the field. I want to make clear. It might go the other way. So I was just happy to see Scattaboo kind of get his due in Arizona State,
Mhm.
kind of for the little guy, for the conferences that are still Power Four, but aren't talked about like SEC to
Well,
represent for the
well,
Big 12 at least.
here's the thing though. Here's exactly my point. Because you have a team like Arizona State, they probably never would have made the 14 playoff. And so they would have probably gone to what probably one of the New Year's Six bowls that
Yeah,
wasn't in the playoff.
Cotton Bowl or
So
something.
yeah, so say they go to one of the non-playoff bowls against, I don't know, say they go up against Boise State or something, like they would, and then Scatabo just opts out because he's saving
Right.
himself for the draft. But instead, he has the game of his career with however many tens of millions of people watching that game.
Yeah.
And so he's flying up draft boards. And so that's exactly my point, is that for a guy like that who probably would have been like, I don't even know, like he probably would have been like probably like a middle of day two pick. I think, I don't really know for sure. Like I
He's probably a
round
first round pick now.
Yeah, I mean now he's probably at the back of the first round,
Yeah,
top
at
of the
least
second.
bottom.
Like
Yeah, like if he's there, Steelers grab him.
because now everybody knows this guy is a dog. He
Yeah,
is a grinder who will put his body on the line.
he will
Like he,
throw.
he is now clearing away like RB2 behind Ashton Genty. And it's like this dude is a beast.
He really
And
is. And Scatterboot, like I
looking
literally was
like
like
Peyton Hillis out
eight
there.
receptions, 99 yards, 30 carries, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then I think he threw a touchdown pass in that game, or at least a
Yeah.
long down the field pass. I can't remember. I literally can't remember because it's
Yeah,
been like a week and a
yeah,
half
yeah,
ago.
yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, shout out Scatterboo. And so yeah, you're right. I mean, we got to see that, and we wouldn't have gotten to see that before. So, any final thoughts on the college football playoff? I don't want to predict the weekend because I already predicted it with you. So,
Yeah, yeah. Let me think.
will Ohio State win by 2 touchdowns against Texas? I think they will win by a touchdown.
Yeah, I don't know for sure about two, but I definitely think that they can cover this one easily.
I think Notre Dame and Penn State's going to be an instant classic. I really believe that.
I to me, like I went back and I looked, like this is crazy. Like they haven't played in like 15 years, and the time before that was like 15 years before that. So it's like they never play anymore, and so this should be fun. I
Two iconic uniforms, two looks. I will say, shout out Rugrats back in the 1990s, if you know what I'm talking about, Casen.
Mhm.
There is a moment where Stu Pickles, the character in the show, he gets distracted and says, "Hey, isn't that the Penn State Notre Dame game?" And it's like implying a time where both of the like when that show was going on, both of those teams were like independent, or at least one of them was independent, and one had
Yeah,
just become a Big Ten team. So they used to play a
I
lot
looked at
more.
yeah I looked it up, and they were both independent, and so they played every year from like 80 to 93,
Yeah,
and then when Penn State joined the Big Ten, they just never played again until 2007.
right.
Like
And that cartoon was like in the early 90s. So there you go. Like, oh,
yeah.
common college football rivalry renewed in 2025. This is very, very cool.
Mhm.
Do you want to shift to a little bit of pro football discussion before we dive into
Sure,
our
sure.
movies? So the
Yeah.
bracket is set. You're wearing a Chiefs shirt, but you are a Cleveland Browns fan. Also, I won't even say at heart. Also,
Well, before we get into the playoffs, we should probably do some
sure.
cleanup on some firings.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so I just to let me go through and see the list
It's
real quick.
Wednesday. We're recording this. Black Monday was, the day where everyone gets fired. Black Weekend, I should say, was this past weekend, Sunday and Monday.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously you have the Bears fired Matt Eberflus a while ago. Bit of the surprises here. You have Doug Peterson out in Jacksonville. I I think somebody said that he's like the third winningest head coach in Jacksonville history. So it's
I
like
believe it.
it just didn't really work out, but like you don't know who's going to be better than that. The Raiders fired Antonio Pierce. Yeah, one and done after that. The Patriots fired Gerard Mayo after one season.
Yeah,
I again, like we talked, you just mentioned it in the college section. You end up you have there's a theme you see of black head coaches not getting the leash
I
some other
agree.
guys get.
I agree.
And
And I don't, I honestly wasn't gonna like bring it up, but because I did bring it up in like our previous segment, I will mention that it's hard to say whether or not this plays a role because I don't necessarily know if, and I'll say this, race playing a role, whatever. That's historically been true that the leash is always shorter, the hook is always quicker with a black head coach. But I think part of this is also because they're former players. And I think there's this idea of if someone hasn't been in the coaching ranks their entire career in the NFL, why should we stick it out with them? And Jerome, I'm not exactly sure exactly, but Antonio Pierce for sure. Obviously, he's like a Giants legend, right? With those Super Bowl teams, and it's hard to say. I thought Pierce had maybe a better sample size because he also took over like half the season last year,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so if there were already things going on internally and that's what's going on, that's fine. But the Patriots one really surprised me, just because I think the Crafts always had this kind of reputation of making calm and steady decisions, sort of like the Rooneys, sort of like the Maras kind of used to in New York.
Well, from what the reporting I've seen on it was that like a month and a half ago, uh Robert Kraft was pretty solid in letting him stay.
Hmm.
And then something happened over the course of the last month and a half to where he got increasingly more concerned over Mayo's ability to learn and adjust and like adapt. And so he was and so something apparently became very clear to him that maybe he wasn't the guy because he just doesn't have the skill set to do that. Like he just wasn't ready for the job.
Yeah, and maybe he was just not ready. I still would feel better about it if he got a second year versus a first year. But the NFL is different than college. The right coach really can get the most out of a roster right away. That's the one
Mhm.
thing I'll say about like when coaches get fired in the NFL. It's sort of like, yeah, I mean, these are what 32, for the most part, billionaires or representatives of billionaire families, right? Who do not think or operate like the rest of us do when it comes to their organizations. Hence why so many of them for years are a laughingstock and make bad decision again and again and again and again and again, and it seems like there's no end. And I'm not necessarily saying that that applies here, directly. I'm not calling anyone out. I'm just saying that some trends and some things in the NFL never change. And I also will say that the Crafts have not really been in this position of not winning. And so
Yeah.
we might see a stretch here where the Patriots are just mediocre-ish to bad for the rest of our lives, Casen, which
No,
to
well,
which to me I'd be absolutely fine with being a fan.
yeah, yeah. I
But
well,
but
I think there's two things here to which
mhm.
I don't know. I don't think Robert Kraft was under some kind of illusion that Gerard Mayo would come in and win 10 games and they'd go to the
No,
playoff.
I don't
Like
think so either. I
they
also
should
don't
have
think he
they
got
should have
fired because
fully
he
been
won the
aware they
last
were a
game.
bad team.
Did you hear what I
No, no,
said?
no, no, no.
I think that's
Yeah,
ridiculous
he was
too.
fired
Yeah.
either way. He was fired either
Right.
way.
Right.
But I think I do think a huge portion of this though is there was some kind of agreement made several years ago that he would be hired when Bill left.
Yeah.
And Kraft had to honor that deal. However, there was no portion of that agreement that said how long he had to be there.
Right.
And a certain somebody was sitting without a job and happened to be on the market. And now it's like, I don't know, 99.9% obvious that Mike Vrabel is going to be the next head coach of the New England Patriots.
Yeah, he wanted
And
he wanted
so, yeah,
Vrabel to be the next guy,
yeah,
and I think
yeah.
it's more along the lines of, well, let's just go ahead and get Mayo out of here, and let's get Vrabel in here. It's unfortunate, but that is the business. We talk about, and I say what I said earlier about the Crafts, but in reality, the Patriots are also the organization that had the inner turmoil of who do they keep, Belichick or Brady, and it's very clear that like they should have kept Brady, and they probably would have won maybe a
Yeah,
couple more Super Bowls.
yeah,
So I mean, the that's already happened. That's been proven.
yeah.
So not that Belichick's not great, but that's been proven. So yeah. So I think there's something to be said. I mean, are there any more firings that we anticipate? I'm a little surprised.
Well,
Some of the retentions have been a little weird.
that is the other thing that so there's a couple things to talk about. Just touching up, we
Yeah.
Saints fired Dennis Allen, and then Jets also fired Robert Salah months ago, and so those are the openings. The other thing that is also very weird is that the Titans fired their general manager Rand Carthon after they chose to keep him last year after firing Vrabel.
Yeah.
So there's this really weird thing in Tennessee to where like they had a bad year last year, fired Vrabel, kept Rand Carthon, and then hired Bill Callahan's son, Brian Callahan from the Bengals, and then now they fire him, and so now like they're just making weird decisions.
It's like they don't
And
want to fully commit to tearing it all down.
right, and so from my understanding of the situation, when they fired I think it was John Robinson, what was their general manager before. He was the idiot that traded away AJ Brown.
Yeah, that was a
Um,
bad move.
and and so he got fired. And when they were looking for a new general manager, Vrabel wanted them to hire this guy that that he knew from the front office. I can't remember who the guy was, but basically Vrabel had a guy that he wanted,
Sure.
that he knew was like a football guy, a scout, that knew that he was like, this guy's prepared. The ownership wanted Ran,
Mm,
and so Vrabel said, "Look, I like Ran. Ran's a nice guy. I just don't think he's ready. I think what you do is you make him assistant GM. My guy comes in, and as the GM, and then he can learn, and then he can go get the GM job, and we'll get some picks for it whenever he gets a job." And they said, "I don't like that." So they hired this guy instead of Vrabel, and then, or instead of Vrabel's guy, and then fired Vrabel. So like the Strunk family just has no idea what they're doing.
right. I don't
Um,
get it.
and then again, with the retentions that are so bizarre, the Jacksonville Jaguars fired Doug Peterson, but kept Trent Baalke, who is the worst general manager in the history of general managers of all time. Like, I don't know like what dirt Trent Baalke has on everybody in the league, but like he's like survived every
Right.
coach fight. Like he outlived Harbaugh. He's outlived I think he outlived Chip Kelly that one year in San Francisco. Like he manages to avoid getting fired and just cleaning house so many times.
Maybe he's just a
It's
really
so
likable guy.
bizarre. Exactly. People just think that like he's the guy that owners love to just be around because
Yeah.
he tells them exactly what they want to hear. And so he's like the best owner friendly GM, except
Right.
he's lying to you and is an idiot.
So I do want to move this along to talking about the actual playoffs. If you're done with retentions,
Yeah.
I think the more things change, the more they stay the same in the league. I the first real indication of the regimes, what are they going to do, is usually the draft, because I swear the draft happens and that's when Schefter chimes in with every pick and says, "Remember, such and such is at the helm now, and remember, such and such is their coach, and the GM was thinking this, that." That's literally my first bell of like the teams that aren't in the playoffs. Of I remember, oh yeah, they like are still a joke. For the most part. For the most part, that includes
Yeah,
your
yeah.
team too,
I
Casey.
mean, oh yeah, I mean also, yeah, by the way, Browns fired Ken Dorsey.
Yeah.
So yeah. Uh
Oh yeah, the Browns are under their
yeah.
fifth head coach in 4 years.
Yeah, I mean
That being
we
said,
also fired our offensive line coach, and just bizarre, like the offensive line coach, the Browns just hired their new offensive line coach today,
mhm,
and it's the head coach, it's the guy that got fired from Rice this year. Like he was the head coach of Rice last year, and so
that
like,
that sounds weird, but in reality, I think that maybe they
but
saw
yeah,
something in his special. Like he probably was a line
he's
coach.
he was an offensive line coach at Stanford under David Shaw for like 5 years. Um,
There you go.
so he coached Andrew Luck there. He coached CMC. Um, I think he's better than the last guy, but just
I
weird.
I saw a meme 2 days ago that I have not been able to get out of my head. Transitioning to the actual playoffs before we move on here, and it was a picture of Mike Tomlin, and it was a fade. It was one of those like four picture fades. Maybe you saw it too,
Yeah.
Casen. And it just kind of faded to Marvin Lewis, former head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. And it was from a Pittsburgh, like a pro Pittsburgh like account. I think it was on Twitter. And I was like, I see where the frustration is coming from. And among a lot of the friends I have, Casen, some of which do listen to what we have to say here and there, some every week. They have been louder than ever with the end of the Steelers season that something needs to change with Tomlin. Something, and it's been like the alarm bells are louder than they've ever been for me in my personal circle.
Mhm.
Like I have found myself on an island as maybe the one Steelers fan left that has a modicum of trying my best to defend Mike Tomlin, which I feel like I don't necessarily need to defend him because he's not going to get fired, guys. Like, I'd be shocked if he's not going to get fired. He's not going to get replaced. This status quo is going to remain unless something catastrophic happens. Do you have any response to that? It seems like
Yes, here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Mhm.
So Mike Tomlin has one thing that Marvin Lewis never had, and that is a
Okay,
Super Bowl.
true.
However, I mean it's been 15 years,
And he
so I
does
don't know
have
how
playoff
long.
wins, which Marvin Lewis also never had.
Correct. And so I essentially the problem is just that like he hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. Is that right?
16, yeah. 8 years.
Um, and so I don't think it's so much as far as like an issue with Tomlin because clearly something's working if they're able to win 10 games with Russell Wilson. It's just like the issue is at 2016 they weren't going to get rid of Ben and Ben was just slowly fading into his arm falling off. But it's also the fact that like he seemingly is really bad at picking his staff. Like he's had awful offensive coordinators for like a decade. Like it's really bizarre that he can't like Arthur Smith, like that's the best guy you could get.
Yeah.
Like serious, like it's just so bizarre that like he cannot seem to find anybody that has an offense from this century. Like
Yeah,
everybody has to
and
be some coordinator that doesn't understand the forward pass was invented.
well,
Like it's so
and
weird.
also I would go as far as to say that what does frustrate me is also the stubbornness to like want to ever get a guy like that. Like I don't understand what he sees or doesn't see in that clearly this isn't going to be the answer. You know, clearly this isn't going
What
to
was
work.
stopping you from dropping a bag for Cliff Kingsbury?
Well, right.
Like
I mean, I wouldn't mind the Steelers just regardless who the quarterback is. I wouldn't mind the Steelers going all out for like someone who's on the caliber of like a Ben Johnson in Detroit or like something like
mhm.
that. I mean, my thing is if you my thing is at some point Steelers brass, if you want to stop having this criticism every single year when you get stomped by the Ravens this weekend, which is going to probably happen. I mean, I suppose they could win. If they win, it's going to be funny to put out maybe the best Ravens team since Lamar's been there. But I will say we're not going to, we're not beating the Chiefs. We're not beating the Bills. And so it's sort of like, okay, it would be cool to get the playoff win. But I think there's a large modicum of Steeler fans that would just rather us lose again because you're not going to win the Super Bowl. And if you beat the Ravens, it's sort of like, okay, well, now I get to watch Josh Allen hang 500 yards on us while we don't score on them on what is objectively the Achilles heel for the Bills every year, their defense.
Well,
And I
it's almost sort of like here's the that's exactly the point is that like the consecutive non-losing season thing, cool,
no
but
one cares about
also
that anymore.
also like you've never been in a position to draft a quarterback since Ben.
Exactly.
So
And
it's
the
like
one time
you almost need to just decide you're gonna tank for Arch or something and
right,
like just get a
like the
quarterback.
one time, the one bad season of the Steelers in the last, I don't know, 25 years was the 7-9 year and we got Ben because of it. And I agree. Like if there's a few guys who have come up where I'm just like, if for some reason that guy fell all the way to the Steelers and they took him, wow, like that would be incredible. And the Steelers have always had these kind of half measures where they will take some sort of no name QB in like the sixth round. And I think there was always just kind of this idea that the next guy would come from that. And no, like I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. You need like a top round guy. So I've heard everything from they should tank
What
to
I
they should
mean,
get rid of
what
like the Steelers are
you're
not
telling me that Zach Mettenberger is not the quarterback of the franchise?
no or oh what the Langley Jones or just
Landry Jones,
or
yeah.
Landry Jones, excuse me, or Mason Rudolph, or just all this slew of random guys they've had. It's just okay. At some point, maybe you need to build out the draft. But then again, you have so many shareholders that were like, would you rather really get rid of the guy who, by the way, would get hired by another NFL franchise the next day? The next day, it would
Hmm.
like if you fired Tomlin, he's on the sideline, maybe even within the division within the next day, within an hour. You know what I mean? Um, I think
Yeah,
I
I can promise you that if the Steelers fired Mike Tomlin, the Ravens would fire Harbaugh and hire him immediately. I can promise you
yeah, and
that.
then you introduced like just the Death Star into the yeah. I mean, who knows? But I've told a couple people what's the biggest difference between the Steelers and Ravens right now, and I say that John Harbaugh and Tomlin are constantly compared in terms of how long they've had and they've been at their
It,
respective places.
it is kind of the same thing. I mean,
It's
the
Lamar. We don't
if
have a franchise quarterback. And let me finish. The thing that Steelers fans are going through right now is no different than it took a decade, like 2.5 decades between Bradshaw and Ben. This is just the purgatory the Steelers tend to live
Mhm.
in between franchise guys. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, never not everybody can be, the Packers and just move from franchise guy to franchise guy immediately. But
To their credit, yeah, I mean
yeah.
that's a very comparable franchise to the Steelers, and I think the Steelers have always kind of thought, well, we'll do that, and it's just like I don't know, I just don't think we have the guy at the top who's capable of making the best move there. Um, so
Yeah, I
that's
mean
my
the issue is that like they are the ones who draft quarterbacks before they're supposed to. And so like you
yeah,
have a guy like, the top QB or one of the top QBs in the draft, available.
right.
But
Anyway,
yeah, I mean there is similar conversations with Harbaugh. It's
right.
just like if the Ravens flame out with this roster with this team, like
Anyway, I'm not going to make a prediction. I will say that I think this is the best Ravens team since Lamar has been there. I will say again, King Henry is running like a man who wants to make it to the Super Bowl.
Mm,
Do I think the Ravens are good enough to beat the Bills and the Chiefs in the playoffs? I actually do. I think they are good enough to beat both of them on both sides of the ball. Will they be able to do so in the back to back in one offseason or one postseason? Probably not. That's my biggest. If they had to go through one or the other, I'd be like, yeah, I could see the Ravens beating them. But the fact that they got to go to both places, if that happens, is the real kicker here. So even if they the
yeah.
Steelers, and just to be honest, I would not want the Ravens to be the team to do that. Okay, I'd much rather one of those other two teams, including the Chiefs, win the Super Bowl again before the Ravens win another one. That's just the rivalry in me. So, um, yeah, that's my 2 cents on the playoffs. I think the Chiefs are going to win it, but getting there, we'll see. We'll be here to talk about it, hopefully weekly as it happens, as we tend to do in January. Thoughts?
Yeah, it absolutely. No, yeah, I mean, I guess just kind of cleaning up some of the stuff. I mean,
Sure.
we saw probably the only like huge game over the week 18 slate was that Vikings Lions game, and the Lions just killed the Vikings.
Mhm.
So
Detroit's
curious to
legit.
see curious to see if the Vikings are just like dead now. Like I don't know if Darnold turned back into a pumpkin and he's just gonna get killed by the Rams. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. But
Buccaneers, Commanders, Eagles, Packers. AFC, you got Bills, Broncos, obviously Ravens, Steelers, and Texans, Chargers, with the Chiefs and
yeah.
Lions being your number one seeds who get the bye. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as I think home team will win. However, I think the Chargers Texans and the Commanders Buccaneers games could be upsets. I think those are
I agree.
those are those are the only two things to which I think there could be the upsets.
Yeah. If I have a
Um,
dark horse this year of a team that I could see like going on a run no one saw coming, the Commanders are definitely towards the top of that list. Um, I like they have a little bit of a Machiavellian. We have no idea what to expect. They have Jaden Daniels. They've played well all year. They could be like rookie year Ben in the playoffs and just knock out two or three teams we don't see coming.
yeah,
NFC
yeah,
side.
they're so streaky and it's so weird because like, you
Yeah.
never really know what they're gonna get.
I mean, I
But
would argue
but
the only yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Good.
I mean, enough crazy stuff has happened in their games that like anything can happen in a Commanders game.
Right.
I mean, especially when you're talking Commanders versus Baker Mayfield.
Right. The
But
Eagles were a team that at multiple times this year we thought, the wheels had completely fallen off. Down the stretch, they really seemed to figure it out. If they burn and crash out in the playoffs again, well, there's going to be a lot of questions yet again in Philly,
oh
especially
my,
two years
oh
in a
yeah,
row,
I well,
which could
I
totally
think
happen.
there's,
They're playing
I
the
think we're
Packers. That could
also
happen.
we're also on I think like Jalen Hurts watch because I think he's still in protocol.
That's true.
So
That's
I
right. They're
I
banged
don't.
up. However,
So
all these Eagles fans are going to be like, "Fly, Eagles, fly, fly." You remember the last time we had QB issues going into the playoffs? We won the
yeah,
Super Bowl.
yeah,
So
okay.
yeah, Nick Foles happened. Who knows if that'll happen again? But um, and
Kenny
yeah, I mean,
Pickett,
I
Super Bowl
think
champion.
the AFC is going to have zero, and I mean zero surprises at all. I don't think a single one. The only maybe one surprise is that I think the Chargers can knock the Texans out right away. Texans have not played well. They've kind of like been middling.
Yeah,
That's the one like upset I can see. Everything else is I think going to go very
yeah.
much the same. It's Chiefs, Ravens, or Bills.
It's been a very weird season for the Texans. Like I mean,
Sophomore
that
slump.
said, like for being 10-7 and matching the record from last year, they've looked bad doing it.
Right.
And CJ's definitely regressed a bit. So just weird, curious stuff. But I mean, they can, retool some stuff and fix it next year, but
Yeah.
it's strange.
Any closing thoughts before we transition?
Uh, no, I think that's all. Yeah, that's all I had.
Cool. Well, we timestamp our show. So, Kason, I'll use my imaginary,
Mhm.
scene cutter thing here and just kind of say, hey, here's where you can cut it for us talking about our most anticipated movies because we got to get into this. Especially following a year, Kason, where we didn't review very many movies. We are like a
Yeah.
self-described Marvel fanboy show. I mean, we are, but at the same time, we didn't really get to a lot of reviews that we, for various reasons, that we probably would have wanted to have. And
Yeah.
part of that, I think, was a strike. Part of that was like some things that 2024 was a bit light in terms of some of the movies, and I think part of it was a lot of good things in 2024, especially as I was looking at various people's top movies list were kind of out of
Mhm.
nowhere. A lot of things that were indie or not as well known. Then you got movies that kind of made that push at the end. You got films like Nosferatu that came out like horror movies that came out around the holidays, but are pushing for those Oscars too, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
very strange, a lot of things. But I made my list. I have it over here, and yeah, I'm ready to get into it, man. I have a question for you before we start off the top five movies list because I do have honorable mentions, which I'll say as well.
Yeah. I do too.
I How do you make these lists? Because I tend to like I knew that one was going to be on here. I ended up putting it at three before I even made four, five, one, or two, and from there I kind of pieced it together from there, and it was hard. I'm not going to lie, this was kind of tough
I,
for me.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I even agree with the order anymore, but it's just it's kind of just like one A B C D like
Right.
it's so hard to to really put these in any particular order because a lot of them are just kind of all equal. And so like I would say there's the 1 and 5 and then 2, 3, and 4 are pretty much just kind of even footing.
Okay.
Uh, and
Well, do you want to start with any honorable mentions or number five? You can talk about some honorable mentions
I
and
I, I
go
think we
into
can
it.
we can circle back to honorable mentions at the end.
Okay, I'm with you
Yeah.
there. That's a good one. Go for it then.
So we can so we
What's
can
your
start
number
with five.
five? Yeah,
So my number five, I'm sure you'll probably be mad about the positioning, but I have Superman at
not
number
mad about
five.
that at all.
I,
Not in the
I I
slightest.
I've said it, I think, on here. I'm just not incredibly a huge DC guy, at least as of yet. But I am excited to see it and to see James Gunn's take on it, and hopefully this can help get me a bit more invested into the DCU. So
For sure, and it doesn't anger me at all because it is on my list as well, and we'll circle back on my thoughts on that. Um, my number five here was interesting. A movie that I wasn't necessarily sure I didn't realize was coming out, but this is coming to us from the great Joseph Kosinski, the same guy who brought us Top Gun Maverick, which in 2022 was my favorite movie that year. F1. It is a
mm.
story. It's starring Brad Pitt. That's about all I know, and it's set in the world of F1. And looks like they're going to try to bring audiences into the same into the driver's seat of an F1 race car, which has been very much compared to that of a fighter weapons, an aircraft. So
Yeah, I kind of remember hearing about it. Yeah, it
right.
it sounds like it's going to be incredible visually for sure.
Absolutely incredible visually. I don't know necessarily, much that they're going to do about the story, but Um, I recently started watching Netflix's Drive to Survive
Mhm.
and get, really, and when I say recently, I'm in the middle of the first season. I know it's been going on for like 7 years, but yeah, I'm just really interested in seeing, really becoming more of a fan of it. I've already been kind of a fan and following, but you've even mentioned F1, tactics and things on here before and of the weeks and other segments. So um, as Formula One continues to be the global phenomenon that it is with global fans, it's cool to see. And I'm just hoping that the movie does it justice because it's one of those things where the entertainment aspect of it alone, of seeing the real thing, is already entertaining enough. Are you going to be able to generate that same thrill from a movie?
Hmm.
So yeah, that's my number five.
Awesome, awesome.
Number
Uh,
four.
my number four, uh, Thunderbolts.
Okay.
Uh, the I have number four just because I really don't know what to expect out of it. The
Well,
the
describe what it
trailer that
is.
we so Th Thunderbolts, which is sometimes referred to as like Dark Avengers. It's sort of like the ragtag squad of rejects from some of the Marvel properties.
It's Marvel
Um,
Suicide Squad
yeah,
because the concept of this came from DC first.
yeah,
It is the second Marvel movie we're getting this year, I believe.
yeah. It comes out May 2nd. Yep. So it's gonna have Florence Pugh and all that
Sebastian
fun stuff.
Stan, David
Sebastian
Harbour, Wyatt
Stan.
Russell, and a lot of characters we
Yeah,
haven't seen in a while, or if even at all, beyond their like one film, right?
yeah.
Um,
So it'll tie up some of the stuff. Yeah, some of the like Captain America stuff, the Black Widow thing. Yeah, I believe. I believe Julie Louis-Dreyfus is in it. That'll I think be a huge part of it.
I agree.
I don't know for sure, but I would imagine there might be something with what's her face, the uh
Help me out here.
the 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 niece, Peggy Carter's niece character.
Oh,
Um
I don't know her name, but yeah,
the yeah,
uh,
I don't know if she's gonna be in Captain America or Thunderbolts, but because remember that like that was like kind of a cliffhanger at the end of the Captain
yeah,
America
she
show
she's
that
like the
they've never
underground.
talked
She's
about.
the underground
Yeah,
boss. I forget what they called her, but in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, she had like a top, like she has a title. Um,
yeah,
I will go ahead and just use this as a transition because my number four on my list is Captain America: Brave New World, most
okay,
anticipated film of the year of the 2025 right now, and the reason it's a good transition that we went different ways here is because I am more interested in this film. Maybe it's just the recency bias or the fact that we're getting it sooner. But I am more interested in this film than Thunderbolts because I think that Thunderbolts is going to be dealing with whatever the aftermath of this film is. We finally get Captain America as a brand again.
I would agree with that.
I,
Yeah.
I Anthony Mackie gets to carry his own movie. Anthony Mackie's an incredible actor. Let's be real,
Hmm.
and I want to see him as Captain America again. It's not said whether or not Sebastian Stan is even in this. I would imagine if he is, it's probably going to be a post-credit scene, like in wherever he's going to begin in Thunderbolts. Like I can almost see a situation in which Brave New World and Thunderbolts are going to feel like a part one and part two of
Yeah.
the regular non-superpowered like Marvel characters. And because they come out relatively so close together, they're going to have to directly deal with events that are going on simultaneously. It's either going to be one dealing with what happened in the other, or it's going to be like stuff in Brave New World is going to be happening at the same time as Thunderbolts. I can see that happening too, where we see something happen at the end of Brave New World that is then also seen from the other perspective from Thunderbolts. Can't you see that? Like there's a disturbance in
Yeah.
so and
Yeah.
so on
Yeah.
like that island or whatever, and the Thunderbolts are dealing. That's like their end game thing in that movie. I think they could do some really cool things there, but quite frankly, we finally get Red Hulk. We finally get Harrison Ford in the MCU movie that he's pretty pumped about. I'm just excited to see where they take the story. I think it's going to be a lot of cool espionage. I think that the in universe U.S. government is going to be in a really rough spot by the end of Brave New World, which is going to be a really
Hmm.
interesting direction to take the Avengers. And I have this written down here. Well, I'll get to that later on. Actually, I take it back. I will tie this back to another Marvel point later on in my list. But Brave New World's my number four.
I definitely, and that's why it's my number three. So I mean,
Oh, cool. Okay,
yeah,
so
just tie in
so you
everything
went
you said.
Thunderbolts
Yeah,
four and okay, and Captain
yeah.
America three. You have anything to add?
Well, no, I would just say, yeah, I have it above Thunderbolts just because it feels like it's being marketed as a bigger movie, as a bigger deal to setting some things up. So definitely because it comes, in a month, uh, and we'll be able to, it'll be um coming back to these characters that we haven't really seen in like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be interesting.
Also, I forgot about this too. Giancarlo
4 years.
Esposito is in that movie.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we got a few massive names that have never been in the MCU before that are going to be in that movie, and I just think you need it to be a tone
Mhm.
setter. And I think the fact that they're putting it out, I guess what on Valentine's Day, is an interesting choice, and it kind of harkens back to when they put out um, during phase like whatever it was, phase 3 when they put out Doctor Strange like at February. That was kind of a fun time. It was kind of an interesting
Yeah,
time to get a Marvel film. And I think 2025 is gonna feel more like a traditional Marvel year because of that.
yeah.
Um,
I can't wait for like Jimmy Kimmel to ask Harrison Ford about the time variance authority. It's just like he's like, "What are you talking about?"
yeah, yeah, that's gonna be good. And you could do a lot of there's gonna be a lot of fun Easter eggs in that too. Will we get some sort of answer as to where Steve Rogers is? That's the other question I've wondered. It's not like it's going to matter to the plot. I just wonder if they're going to canonize any of these theories, right?
Yeah.
Uh, my number 3 is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and I will say that I wrote this. Like I said, I wrote this number 3 in first, and then kind of pieced 1, 2, 3, and 4 in because I knew it deserved to be at least number 3, 2 or 3 on my list. But there are just two films that I'm looking forward to more than this one. Let's be real. It's Tom Cruise. They're bringing it. I just want to see how they wrap up this arc of Luther, Ethan, and Benji. Uh, how does it end? How does it end with Haley Atwell's character, the entity, all of the things going in? I like that they didn't do the part 1 and part 2. They kind of Hollywood kind of quickly got away from that. Like they were going to do it and then they got away from it. Is funny, and yeah, you have especially Ethan. I think the Mission Impossible franchise will continue in some way, but I want them to kind of close the book on this story. These guys that are part of the original IMF and just leave everyone in a good spot. What's the big overall big stunt going to be? I don't know. We'll probably it's they've kept that pretty well under wraps, but yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Definitely.
Any thoughts on Mission Impossible or anything like that?
I will get back to it.
Okay. All right. Go for it.
Uh my number 2 is Fantastic Four coming out July 25th. I'm definitely just curious to see how they do it because it's, a period piece ish sort of set in the 60s. So I'm really intrigued to see their take on it. Um I am really curious to see the direction they go with it and kind of how it's done. Um love the uh the two Fantastic Fours that we got with like uh the what was this the Sony the ones
It was Fox. It was
15 years
20th
ago.
Century
Yeah,
Fox.
the
Yeah.
Fox
The ones that were
Yeah, not the
effectively
not the
put
Fan
to
Four
bed.
Stick,
Right.
but
The ones that were effectively put to bed in Deadpool and Wolverine.
yeah, yeah.
The ode to those casts, which was really awesome. Hit me in the feels like a Deadpool and Wolverine movie I never thought would or could.
Hmm.
Really, during the credits of that film. Um, it's cool you say that. Great minds think alike because my number 2 is also a Fantastic Four First Steps in terms of movies I'm anticipating this year. And it's interesting because I'm with you because I've gone as far as to say, Casen, that Fantastic Four First Steps has to be like an Iron Man level film. Like it
Yeah.
has to establish so many things, and that's actually part of the reason why I think we've seen nothing from it because I think Feige recognizes how important that is. And
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
from my understanding, I believe uh Victor Von Stark is going to be in it in some
Mhm.
capacity, setting up Doomsday. So,
Right. And so are we going to see an
mhm,
alternate reality 60s? It's supposed to be in the 60s or something like that.
mhm,
The other big thing is Stan Lee's favorite characters he ever created by his thing were the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. And
yeah,
we've never really had a proper Fantastic Four on screen. And so they're going to take a lot of care in making sure that it feels good, that they feel like an organic,
mhm,
Marvel's first family. That's what they're nicknamed. But here's another thing, and this was the thing I was going to mention earlier. I'm circling back to what I was going to say back at number 4. Captain America: The Brave New World. Avengers Doomsday is scheduled for May 1st, 2026. Like, we're in another one of those situations where we're getting these arbitrary Avengers movie dates and we haven't established, anything yet. And unless they're going to, I mean, are they telling me that they're going to establish enough in the shows and the movies from Fantastic Four First Steps to go right into like a Doctor Doom centric Stark film? Like Stark, obviously variant Doctor Doom, but I digress. By May of 2026? No way. I assume that those dates are going to get pushed again, just because there's no way. Like there's no way that in like 3 movies we're going to be able to establish enough characters to have a full fledged Avengers movie, right? I mean, I keep looking at this and I'm like, there's no way. Like, it just can't happen. So that's where I'm at right now. In a world where I really think that the Robert Downey Jr. coming back thing could backfire tremendously, that's just this movie has to do a lot. Fantastic Four: The First Steps. It has to establish a whole lot, and I'm very very excited for it, but I'm also very nervous for it. Thoughts on any of that?
No, I agree. I mean, I'm nervous to see, how they execute it, but it's Matt Shackman who did WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some expectations of just being interesting, weird, maybe. I'm just really intrigued to see how he directs this movie, because his the way he executed the show WandaVision was really unique and interesting. So
And let's be real, this is a good cast. I'm excited to see Pedro as Reed Richards. I'm excited to
yeah,
see Joseph Quinn as Johnny, Vanessa
mhm,
Kirby as Sue Storm,
absolutely.
and Iban Moss. I don't know how you say his last name. Iman Boss Bacharach as
Back,
Ben
yeah,
Grimm,
yeah.
I believe is how you say it.
The
So
the yeah.
they
I
never miss with their
I
casting. So yeah,
well, apparently I kind of forgot this. John Malkovich is in it. So
yeah,
that's gonna be weird.
yeah. That
Yeah,
will be a bit strange, but we'll see. I think it's all going to work. But I can tell you that I am anticipating a first trailer for First Steps like I was the Superman trailer. I can just be very honest with you,
yeah, yeah.
like because I'm like, okay, tonally they have to nail this. So, Casen, that brings you to your number one most anticipated movie of 2025, which by process of elimination, I think I know it's going to be.
Yes, it is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning.
Awesome.
Uh, Comes out May 23rd. Yeah.
Let's
So
circle back to that film.
yeah. So exactly like what you said earlier. I am just really this plot of like this Dead Reckoning storyline with the entity is just so ridiculous and insane, and I am just very intrigued to see how they tie up the story arc, based off of the cliffhanger from the last film, and also how they end it, because I don't know. I mean, they haven't really said anything. I don't know. I mean, they're leaning into some of the speculation that it's the last one. I don't know what we're gonna get from here on out. I have a hard time believing Tom would just stop doing them, because he makes $1 bazillion every time he makes one,
And he
and,
loves
and
doing
he's
them,
a, and
and
he
they're still
and he's
high
yeah,
quality.
and he's a psycho, and so like
He
I
is a
think
little
I think
wild.
he'd climb a building or ride on a plane at the age of 75 if he wanted to. So yeah, he's a lunatic that'll just do whatever he wants. I think there's
He
a
wants
there's a
to do one
chance
in
here.
space, which would be wild.
Yeah, I honestly, there's a universe to where there's a Mission Impossible like mini series,
Mm,
sort of like, to me, I'm thinking of something kind of like the Jack Ryan show on
yeah,
Prime or something, or like there's a universe to where you could do something like either a prequel, with like Tom as like an EP or something. Yeah, I don't know. There's ways you could go with this universe that
right.
that would feel different, rather than just because it's felt like a lot. I mean, we've gone with like nuclear bombs. It's great. Like, it's crazy. Like, think like going back to watch the first one and just seeing, oh, there's this list that has every asset that the CIA has, and if it gets out, everybody's going to be compromised. To, oh, there's a nuclear bomb, and and then two, oh, there's an AI that's going to
There's
destroy the
multiple
world.
nuclear.
Yeah, like
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because what I didn't say earlier when I mentioned it at my number three spot, no disrespect, of course, is that Ethan Hunt has always had real world like terrorists to deal with, like real world threats. Like
yeah,
it's always been man. You know what I mean? And the entity did a very good job in the last one, Dead Reckoning Part One, Dead Reckoning, of making the entity seem very scary because of the unknown when it was like talking to him, and you could see the other villains, like Vanessa Kirby's character and others, scared of this thing. It's sort of like, yeah, but what do you do against an entity and against an AI that seemingly is all knowing, And I think it preys on just maybe our natural just fear of AI and what it could become. And
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
cool take on it, is all.
Yeah, exactly. It's like to me, it's a very interesting storyline because it's like you go back through the different things, with Ethan Hunt. It's like it's just bad guys sometimes with devices or viruses or different things to where now literally who are you fighting?
Yeah,
You're fighting the cloud. And so to me, this is like Ethan being like, I don't even know what's going on
let's
anymore. Like
find the sub
I
and
give up. Like
let's find the sub and blow it up.
yeah,
Because
And-
apparently it's all on a sub that's at the bottom of the ocean. So
exactly. And like I think I think that like the whole point is that if you blow up the sub, then the entity will die. I don't know how that works, but
there's no way it's that cut and dry.
no, not at
I,
all.
I will say that the poster for this movie is really cool. It's like that light behind Ethan and he's all like messed up in
Yeah.
the face. And I'm like, dude, that is like cool. Like the final
Yeah,
look.
I had the one from the last one I got at the movie theater.
Which shout out to Morgan because that was one of my favorite covers that she made when we reviewed Dead Reckoning and with
Oh
like
yeah,
the
yeah,
smoke rising up off of that. Um, so are you good with your number one? Because I need to get into my
yeah.
number one because
Yeah.
my number one, I think you can probably guess what it is based on
What's
and,
missing
and
from
it's
the
the Thunder.
list?
I'm kidding. No, it's not the Thunderbolts at all. It's I'm actually wearing a shirt in promotion of the
Yeah, yeah,
film that says "Take Me Home," and it's the Fortress of Solitude. I will even get up here so that you can actually see it.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Incredible,
yeah,
actually. The shirt's quite good. Yeah, Superman 2025, and I'm not going to talk everyone's ear off about it, but the reality of the situation is that this character hasn't gotten his due since arguably Superman the animated series. Shout out to Bruce Timm and all the folks at WB Kids back in the day who wrote and Paul Dini and all those incredible writers who once upon a time there was an interconnected universe of Batman the animated series, Justice League, Superman the animated series, and then years later Batman Beyond was going on at the same time, but it was years in the future. So like stuff in the present day. Like it was all, from the WB and then it moved to Cartoon Network and all that stuff. That's what we're getting at. And I really think that this is going to be a lot of people's starting gun to a great DCU. Regardless of how you feel about Superman, I really think that Superman, when done well, is supposed to feel like on the level of Steve Rogers, of you're rooting for him
hmm
doing everything he possibly can to do the right thing, and that's why it's always been poignant that his enemy is a billionaire who has everything, right? It's something to be said for, yeah, you have superpowers, but that's the thing, he wants to do good, and I don't want to become rambling here, but I'm so excited to see what James Gunn does with the DCU, and I'm so excited. I think for folks like yourself, who you started this whole list out, I'm happy that it even made the list because I wasn't even sure it was even going to make your list, Superman. Because it's like I said, I think I've been in a vacuum at times of being excited for this film, but yes, I am more excited for Superman 2025 than anything Marvel has on the slate this year. However, I will say that's why I have Fantastic Four right under it because I think it is noteworthy that two of the oldest, in literally DC's case, the oldest, um, heroes, characters,
Properties.
groups, properties, you want to say, are coming out within a month of each other. And I think it's by design, or within a couple of weeks of each other. We're going to get Superman on July 11th, and then we're going to get Fantastic Four from Feige and the squad. Finally, we're going to get a Fantastic Four movie. And I think tonally, it's just going to be a breath of fresh air for both.
Hmm.
And these are, again, two of the oldest IPs in comics, and and major films for both are coming out in the same month this year. And that's why I had to put them one and two. And for me, it was like, which number one? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm more excited for the next James Gunn movie in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if you've heard talks. There's rumors. Casen, you can take this with a grain of salt. You can take it not. But the early test screenings for Superman are going on right now, and a lot of the leaks have said that it's Guardians of the Galaxy 1 level good. Take that with a grain of salt. We don't know if
Which
that's
I
true or
mean, I
not.
believe. Yeah,
But
I look.
and people who have been scared that there's a lot of characters in the movie, name me a James Gunn movie with a lot of characters that's bad. You can't do it.
No, I absolutely. I mean, look,
Go ahead. Yeah.
James Gunn makes great movies, and I never, I I have no like concerns about whether or not it's gonna be good. I mean, I don't know, the comics to, be able to say if they uh honor the spirit of them. But I'm sure that's a huge um thing that he's focusing on as well. Part of the reason that it's on my list, is it was filmed in Cleveland.
Yeah.
We get to see him blow up the Guardian Stadium.
I mean, it's in the trailer.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
pulling it up, but I mean that's definitely there. I do also like this whole idea of, hey, if Cleveland is Metropolis, Pittsburgh's Gotham kind of thing. That's news as of this week. There might be rumblings that Matt Reeves' Batman might be the DCU's Batman. Obviously, that's been a point of discussion between UI, Casen, and friend of the show, Matt. We'll see what happens. I don't know what the right answer is, but I know what I would do. And for right now, it's promote my Superman movie and see what happens with
Yeah,
Batman.
yeah.
Really, and let Matt Reeves write a script and see what happens.
Hmm.
I'm just so excited for Superman later this year and all of the rest of these films. And I'd love to hear some of your honorable mentions because I have like or three or four things I'd like to
Yeah.
acknowledge that are coming out this year.
Honorable mention. I will say, Wicked for Good, the
Yeah,
second, the sequel to, or Act Two, of the musical there. Um,
and you saw
will
Wicked,
come out.
first one.
I did see the first one. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I'll go through all of them. I
Go for
also
it.
have Happy Gilmore 2.
Yeah,
It will probably be trash, but
I
we'll
don't
see.
care.
Who knows?
I am on
Um,
board.
starring,
Yeah,
starring. And I also have the Naked Gun revival. I
interesting.
I also probably going to be trash, but I have no idea what to expect with that because it's so bizarre, so weird. But I we'll see. I have no idea.
Are those all of
Mhm.
yours?
Yeah.
I guess I'll just start by saying the Thunderbolts is number one on my honorable mentions. To be honest with you, I was gonna put the Thunderbolts or Captain America at number four, and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm just more excited to see Captain America again than I am Thunderbolts. No, no knock against the anyone involved. Just I have no doubt they're both probably going to be good. It's just Captain America needs to start things off well, and I'm more anticipating that.
Yeah, I get
Go
that. And
ahead.
I think the thing with the Thunderbolts is that it's just kind of like, I think you're right in the fact that they are not marketing this at all because so much of the storyline, I think, hinges on the plot of Captain America,
Right,
which makes sense. It makes sense, and it's just kind of the way things work.
right.
And so they can market it for 3 months. It's just people have no idea what's going to happen in this movie, and they're not marketing it at all because
Yeah,
they can't until after Valentine's Day.
right. And we never even talked about really. Well, I think we did talk about the trailer once upon a time, but the trailer is super vague. It has
Yeah.
it has a rendition of "Where's My Mind," which is a great song that ended one of the greatest movies. Well, maybe not one of my favorite movies, but a very great movie, Fight Club. Is like last scene has that song. So the tone setting of I'm like, that's a very good song to have in there. I'm curious to see what they do with Thunderbolts, and I think we will get a more robust trailer the second that Captain America's out.
Hmm.
Just like how I think we're gonna get, I think we might get a trailer for like maybe Fantastic Four or a teaser at the Super Bowl, or For me the next time to do a actual Superman trailer is the Super Bowl, because to me that makes sense, and American staples and all that. Um, Not to get back on that, I have this written down. Presence, which is a film that was brought to my attention by the great Jeremy Johns on YouTube. And it's actually apparently it's supposed to be a quote unquote haunting. I don't know if it's even classified as a horror movie. I think it's a thriller, but it's supposed to be a haunting film from the perspective of the ghost that's
Mm.
haunting. And I'm thinking to myself, that is a cool concept that no one has ever tried before. It could also be really boring. like like the potential of that being not interesting at all is also very high. If I see that at all, it's going to be on streaming. I just figured out, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting thought to potentially go with. The last film I have here on this list, simply because I'm very curious to see just apparently it's a fantastic musical, and I'm just curious to see what this is like. But we get the next really, really big biopic this year. You know what I'm about to say, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jackson's biopic comes out in 2025, and I think it comes out in fall 2025. It's going to be a massive spectacle when it comes out, because I don't think, especially with like as much as we've seen recently with like say Taylor Swift and just the amazing tours we've seen from various artists over the last few years that go viral on things like TikTok and other places, and
Yeah.
the power of social media, it's hard to like describe to people how famous Michael Jackson was. And if you want to make comparisons to like Elvis and his prime, like with the power of TV, the closest thing we've had in the modern era prior to social media was Michael Jackson. When I say this, I mean look up old like performances where he would just come out and stand, and people were passing clean out. They were fainting.
Mm-hmm.
Like it that we have not seen anything like that since we've been alive, Casen. So, and apparently it's his what? It's his nephew playing him or something like that. So, I'm very curious to see what they do with it. That and quite frankly, the attention it gets. I'll leave it at that. So that's what
Yeah,
I got. That's
definitely.
what I got written down as my honorable mentions. I write honorable mention down of movies that I'm interested in seeing, also kind of just to acknowledge that they were happening, because I remember us doing this exact same thing a year ago, Kason, and we could like almost not even formulate a top five list. You remember that?
Yeah, 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 definitely.
I didn't have an issue with that this year. So anything I left out? Anything else to say on any of that?
No, I mean, I think yeah, I think we covered everything pretty well. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll talk about. I think we'll probably talk about all of our top five at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. As things slow down in the summer, that's the one. That's the one thing that's a beauty about our podcast, Kason, is that you get sports heavy during the sports calendar year, but then we got all these movies to talk about in the summer, things like that. So, I will also say that like probably no guarantees that we review every single one of these, but like our top four, we'll definitely have reviews for and things along that nature. But
mhm.
that's the show, folks. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, watching, bearing with us as we had an awkward beginning because of our technical difficulties. But hey, you fight through it. Any final thoughts as we return to watching sports and cinema in 2025, Kason?
Uh,
And don't say go Chiefs. That's not allowed.
that was going to be yeah, that was going to be what I was going to say. So I'll just say I don't. Yeah, that's all I
How
have.
about go Cavs, since they look incredible?
Also very true. Yeah,
Yeah,
we haven't really talked about that much. That is something to be excited about.
Cavaliers,
The Cleveland Cavaliers are an absolute juggernaut, and tonight in like 10 minutes,
Wednesday
they're
night.
15 minutes, they're playing the Thunder, who are also a machine. So yeah, crazy stuff.
Finals
Cavs are gonna
preview,
win the
question
title.
mark?
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe.
it definitely, probably, yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, well, we'll get to that in due time as well. But that further ado, thank you again, everyone, so much for watching. We look forward to spending 2025 with you as well. It marks the second year for our show, as we started in January of 2023 in the midst of the playoffs. I believe our first story was our first show
Mhm.
was literally talking about the divisional round. So in spirit, we're gonna
Yeah,
kind of mark that 2 year anniversary here soon. So until then, this is Kellan,
this is Casen.
and we'll see you as always at the next stop.